Hello and welcome again to another Facts Matters podcast. I'm Guy Gordon on behalf of the Citizens Research Council of Michigan, dedicated to the proposition that facts should drive policy, not politics. And as we look at the beginning of the Michigan school year, politics abounds, certainly. We've got parents either rejoicing or shedding a tear with the end of summer. But the one thing they all have in common is that the most highly used form of punctuation right now is the question mark, especially on the part of teachers and administrators. I'm joined by Craig Thiel, Research Director for the Citizens Research Council, who first warned us about this back in June, about the impact of the budget uncertainty on the Michigan free breakfast, free meals for all program. Craig, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Guy. Thanks for having me to the podcast.
And I guess the facts that really matter here is somewhat of a breaking news, which is this lack of certainty in the K through 12 budget is already prompting some school districts, at least one notable school district, to make a decision about their meals program even before the kids return.
Yes, Guy. We just wrapped up last school year. It was the second full school year where the state of Michigan guaranteed to all school districts across the state that students would eat free breakfast and free lunch regardless of their income status. And the state funded that program for the last 2 years to the tune of about $200 million. As you've heard, the state budget hasn't been completed. And one of the items that is not in the mix, at least in terms of the House budget proposal, is dedicated funding for the Universal School Meals Program. So that $200 million that has been in the budget for the last 2 years is not there, designated for school meals, and it's caused a school district here in mid-Michigan to tell parents that until the state decides what it's going to do, we're going to err on the side of caution and not offer free meals to all students, but keeping in mind that the students that do qualify based on their income for free breakfast and lunch through the federal school lunch program will continue to be fed in schools.
So that $200 million, which was the state basically backfilling what the feds had provided during COVID, when they said food insecurity was so rampant that they felt that they had to go and supply these meals regardless of income, that it wasn't going to be means tested anymore. So that $200 million is still in the House GOP budget. It just isn't earmarked. So why is that a concern?
Well, for school districts that for the last 2 years have received that money specifically for school meals, they would not get that money specifically for school meals. But as you noted, the money's still in the budget, but instead of being earmarked, it's rolled up with a number of other items, and those dollars then are given to school districts, and they're given the flexibility, the discretion then to decide how they want to program those dollars. So the House proposal provides the same top line level of funding to school districts, but how that money flows to districts looks different in the House proposal compared to what the governor and the Senate proposed.
But it also opens the door that in a pantheon of competing priorities, that many of these superintendents might say, well, okay, look, I've got this money that has free meals for all in it, but it also is to go to English learners, mental health, school safety, literacy coaches, assessments. I mean, a lot of important stuff. Maybe we can shave some dollars off the meals program and put it into higher priorities, which means not everybody's going to be covered.
That's kind of the motive of the House proposal, is to move the funding decisions, program-specific funding decisions, from Lansing down to the local districts, giving districts the ability to decide what's best for their students. Now, with that comes the loss of a guaranteed funding stream. In this case, the free meals or student mental health grants. But what districts then have is the ability to say, well, we think mental health is the most important program, so we're going to put, our school meals dollars into mental health, or vice versa.
And what would be wrong with that if you believe in local control and making sure that the money follows the greatest need for that particular district? What are the consequences of that, other than maybe getting a budget that's tailored for that district and would be more effective?
Exactly. Local district administrators, superintendents are provided extra flexibility with the way the House plan is laid out. But proponents and advocates for feeding students, or statewide organizations that want to make sure that the mental health needs of students are attended to, the loss of dedicated funding comes with a loss of statewide accountability for the use of those dollars. So now, instead of advocates going to Lansing saying we want, students to be fed, students' social emotional learning needs to be addressed in the state capital, they have to make those cases to every school district across the state.
Well, there also, though, is a very, I think, a human consequence to this as well, at least according to the proponents of the Meals for All, and that is, right now, if everything's means tested, Tom gets a free meal, Jack doesn't. Jack now knows that Tom is a low-income kid, and that means Tom can be the target of bullying, or at least there is a stigma that you're one of the poor kids that gets a free lunch. When you had free meals for all, there was no stigma attached. I guess at a human level, how significant is that?
Yeah, no, the research has shown that, feeding students, well-fed students are developmentally better off, academically better off, socially better off, including reducing stigma. That's for sure the case. However, the program at the federal level guarantees that anyone who qualifies for free lunches will get fed. The state program was.
Well, hold on a second there, because I believe that you're right, but they have to qualify first. And with recent changes to SNAP and Medicaid, that can influence eligibility, can't it?
Right. So we're in a period right now where the federal government is making fairly substantial changes to social safety net programs. And while we don't know the specific numbers of impact either nationally or in Michigan, we do know the general direction, and that is people will be losing access to Medicaid and access to SNAP. And those programs are used in Michigan schools to help identify students for free meals. If they automatically qualify for Medicaid or SNAP, then they automatically get recognized as being eligible for free and reduced price lunch. If families lose those federal program benefits, then they will have to go and apply through a paper form with their school district to document that they're income eligible for the free school meals. So even though you're correct, we have a lot of uncertainty with Medicaid and SNAP enrollments down the line. Families, if they qualify based on their income, will still be able to access the federal free meals program.
But it may require more engagement on the part of the school district and maybe social workers within the system to make sure that families file the correct paperwork and make sure that their kids are found to be eligible.
Right. And Michigan's been at the forefront of linking up those federal safety net programs and the school lunch programs such that it's almost automatic. If a student or parents are on the Medicaid rolls or the SNAP rolls, then the schools get that information and just automatically roll those students into the free school meals program. But with the federal changes that you've discussed, if a parent temporarily loses Medicaid eligibility because they didn't fill out a piece of paper, or they didn't show up for a meeting with the Department of Human Services or whatever, those impacts would have downstream effects on their children that are enrolled in school and getting free meals through Medicaid and
Okay.
SNAP eligibility.
So right now, because the budget process is still at this stalemate and we really don't know where we're going to end up, can we make an educated and informed guess at where the chips may fall? You said for kids that qualified in the past, maybe pre-pandemic, you believe that those kids will still qualify, but what about those kids kind of in the middle?
Right. Well, it's the federal school meals program is income based. The State Department of Ed sent out the income thresholds just 2 weeks ago, notifying schools and parents what those are. Again, if families qualify based on those thresholds, if they're not getting access directly through the federal programs, the state has a application process that families got in their kind of return to school packets that they need to fill out, and this would be kind of an important piece of paper to pay attention, especially given the uncertainty around the Michigan funding, for parents to fill that out just as a safeguard in the event that, the Medicaid changes
Right.
and the SNAP changes capture those families kind of in the changes that are happening at the federal level.
And you've pointed out that this may complicate some things if districts like Okemos decide just to abandon the Meals for All program altogether. There will certainly be an impact with the kids on the fringes that were getting it before. Um, but that there were already some funding inequities when it came to how the state doled out those $200. We've got these districts that are haves, these districts that are have-nots, and in some cases, the have-nots, even though they had a higher burden of free meals, they didn't get indexed funding.
Right. Because of the nature of the universal meals for all, the majority of the $200 million that the state was putting in to kind of cover the difference between what it costs to feed all kids and what the federal government brings to the table,
Mm-hmm.
on a per pupil basis, more funding was going to districts that might be considered more well off. In other words, districts that have lower concentrations of low income students, because the money is being used to fund lunches and breakfasts for families that have incomes that are above the federal free lunch level thresholds. So yes, the funding for the school meals program is kind of skewed more in terms of a per pupil distribution towards higher income districts with fewer low income students.
Yeah.
Again, because the idea is the state through this free meals program is providing funding for all students after the federal government picks up its portion of the tab for low income students.
So, do we know approximately how many students this could potentially um, impact? We know that, I mean, prior to the Meals for All program back in 2019, prior to the pandemic, we had 383,000 students getting some form of low income meal support. When we went to Meals for All, how much did that increase? And so correspondingly, how many might we lose?
Yeah, it's the State Department of Ed provided a snapshot based on, I think, some October student counts.
Yeah,
And
a 1 month picture.
yeah, 1 month picture, which is probably fine for painting a kind of an overall view of this. It's north of 100,000 students on about a 1.4 million student enrollment statewide. So maybe about 10 to 15% of K-12 students would lose access to these free meals. Now, the free meals for all as the title implies, is available to all students, but not all students participate for one reason or the other. But when we look at the data provided by the Department of Ed, there was between 150, 200,000 student bump up from the participation rate before the free school meals for all program was implemented to when it was implemented.
Okay. So is there anything that we haven't touched on yet that you think that we need to give a quick look to? If not, let's do a quick wrap up.
Yeah, I think we covered this. The school.
So first and foremost, we've got districts already making the call on whether to kill the free meals for all just because of the uncertainty.
Right. And I was going to make a point that the current year budget runs through September 30th. And so that $200 million that's available this year is good through the end of September. So schools that started, last week and that start after Labor Day will still have the money from this current fiscal year.
But why spend it if, what, are you going to buy food? Are you going to hire people not knowing whether or not it's going to be all canceled in 30 days?
So it's definitely a challenge. Some districts have been super conservative and said, you know what, until we know that the state dollars are going to be there, we're not going to offer it up. And so beginning with, the first day of school, the case that you mentioned, Okemos, has told the parents, don't plan on free meals for all. Definitely, right. Students who qualify for free reduced price lunch through the federal program will continue to get those benefits. But the students that don't qualify through those mechanisms won't have access to the free meals program that's funded by the state.
Okay, and I think the other key takeaway based on our conversation is that regardless of what happens with the state budget, maybe they will fund the entire program again and earmark that $200 million if that is what comes out of negotiations on the part of administrators and on the part of parents. You still may have a higher bar to get your student to qualify.
Yeah, and that would be being driven largely by the federal changes with the federal Medicaid and SNAP. Right. The immediate concern, I think, for families in Michigan is whether or not the state's going to re-up and reauthorize the $200 million. The midterm and long-term challenges to families are what's happening at the federal level and how those changes will affect families' ability to access Medicaid and SNAP.
And in the meantime, as we said, the question marks loom, and maybe one of the biggest question marks in the kitchen these days is what are we packing for the kids' lunch? Because in some cases, they may not have had to do that for a while.
Yep, it's been 2 years that the state's operated this program, and I imagine a lot of families, especially if they just started the K-12 journey, that's the only thing they've known in the time that their kids have been enrolled in public schools.
All right. Craig Thiel, thanks so much, Research Director at the Citizens Research Council of Michigan.
Have a great day.
And as lawmakers continue to hash out the state budget, we'll be here to make sense of it for you. If you enjoy these fact-based, unbiased, partisan-free looks at state policy and policy that impacts families like yours, we want to remind you that this is completely donor-funded at the Citizens Research Council of Michigan. We don't take government dollars. We don't take lobbying dollars. We are donor-supported. And if this is a valuable service to you, then we invite you to visit crcmich.org. That's crcmich.org, and maybe throw a few coins in the kettle. Until then, for the Facts Matter podcast, I'm Guy Gordon. Have a great day.
The Citizens Research Council of Michigan has been providing lawmakers, academics, the media, philanthropists, business leaders, voters, and all Michiganders with factual, unbiased, independent information on significant issues concerning state and local government organization and finance for over a century. Our research is available to you. Go online at crcmich.org and on all the social media platforms, Twitter, Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and download our research. Check out our numerous papers and blogs and listen to our podcasts. And while you're there, please consider supporting our research with a donation. This has been a Facts Matter podcast, a presentation of the Citizens Research Council of Michigan.